Hi, my name is Richard Ingebretson. I'm with the University of Utah School of Medicine, and today we're going to talk about foot problems. This is an incredibly important subject in backcountry medicine, particularly if you're going to go hiking, backpacking, and trekking. One of the issues that we have with that when you go out there is that you put more weight on your body and your feet take the brunt of it. And so this becomes an issue if there is a single focus point on our body that creates issues in backpacking, hiking, and trekking. It is our feet. So let me get the slideshow on and let's start. So foot problems in the backcountry is a big one. Um, it's if you look at the numbers, it's estimated that 90% of hikers have experienced painful foot issues. That's a lot, and this has and everybody has something, but 90% have something that may actually affect them in a really bad way. So this has a huge impact on somebody's ability to continue. And if you're not prepared for this, nothing will end a trip quicker than a blister or some problem on the foot. Something that at home is an irritant, but in the backcountry is trip ending. It's really challenging to assess the feet because of its complexity and particularly the multiplicity of the joints that are in the foot. So in each foot, there's 28 bones. That's nearly 1/4 of all the bones in the entire body are in our feet, therefore, with our 2 feet. There are 30 joints and more than 100 muscles, ligaments, and tendons. Now you think about that, and that becomes a real problem to try and assess them. So there are ways to assess it and prevent and treat without having to know the detailed anatomy of the feet. So while our feet are very flexible and adapt to uneven surfaces, particularly when hiking, it makes us very susceptible to injury. So the foot is kind of divided into these these sort of basic areas. The first is sort of the front part. And these are our toes. We are the phalanges. Their function really is to grip and to clamp the feet, but it's the final propulsion of the foot is given mostly to the big toe. That's the one that when we walk that carries most of the weight. No weight rests on the big toe as the body stands. Um, it really carries its weight with each step, but also it maintains balance and aids in propulsion. So that becomes kind of an important issue. The midfoot has the irregular shaped bones that we know called the navicular, which in the foot is still called the navicular. In the hand, it's the scaphoid. They changed the name, but the foot, it's still called the navicular. The cuboid, the medial, intermediate, and lateral cuneiforms, together they form the arch of the foot. Now, the arch is really important. We're going to get back to that. But it plays a key role in weight bearing and stability, but also in storing energy. The hind foot is really basically the calcaneus. They do put the talus in there. These are the largest of the bones in the foot, and calcaneus is the heel. The talus rests on the top of the calcaneus and forms the pivoting joint of the ankle. So when you press on that, if someone's injured, then you can see if they have an arthritis or a problem there. Now we want you to make sure you understand this. There are 3 arches on our foot: the transverse, the lateral longitudinal, and the medial longitudinal. Take a look at that, and we want you to kind of memorize that. Notice on this person's left foot how the arch also back curves that way. So the foot has these 3 large arches to it. And these should be examined anytime someone is on a hike, going on a hike. But before they go on a hike, it's more important because if people have flat feet, then they're going to have real problems. These lead to bunions and hammer toes and the inability to continue on long hikes because they don't store the energy and absorb the impact. So the arches are designed to act like springs, and that's exactly what they are. They aid propulsion and they store the energy. This separates us from animals like horses and others who can run real fast, but they can't run far. Humans are very well adapted at running and hiking far, largely due to the arches in our feet. Horses and others that clop along will go fast, but they lose a lot of energy as their hoofs hit the ground. Whereas humans with these arches actually store the energy and propel forward, which makes humans, for this and other reasons, but this particularly makes us large, enduring athletes. In fact, humans are the endurance athletes. A horse cannot run nearly as far, not nearly as far as a human. So the arches bear the weight of the body, absorb the shock, um, and it's the flexibility is conferred to the foot by the arches. The energy-sparing spring properties of the foot's arch have become central to its mechanical function. And without it, the foot just won't function. There is an enormous amount of metabolic energy saved by the arches, which is due to the what we call the passive electric work. And remember that the word work from physics is an energy term that would otherwise be done by active muscles. So by the arch being able to store the energy and propel us forward, we use it. Now remember, the animals on Earth that don't have arches don't endure. Remember this also, that hikers and trekkers carry an additional load on their back, up to 15, 20, 25, 30 pounds. And so a person with a low longitudinal arch or flat foot walks with their feet in the pronated position where the foot everts. This makes the person susceptible to heel pain, arch pain, and plantar fasciitis. So you really want to have a normal arch when you're backpacking, and you might have to put inserts in the foot to accomplish that. So before you go out with people, you want to look at their feet and make sure that they have good arches. High arches, there is less surface area for absorbing impact, and that's going to place excessive pressure on the back part of the foot and the forefoot area. This can make a person susceptible to foot conditions such as heel pain, and they get a lot of that if their arches are bad, are flat, and metatarsalgia and plantar fasciitis. So high arches are just as bad as low arches. So having the proper arch support becomes vital. So most shoes have useless inserts, and even if they buy new shoes, if you pull the inserts out, they're useless, and they don't give arch support. So one thing you can do is go buy arch support. If somebody's foot is too high or too low, you can go down. There's a bunch of brands of these, and if you go to a store where they're well trained, they can watch somebody walk and video it. You can see if you're over everting or pronating and decide what would be a good arch support, and they can measure the arch. If they need new shoes but they can't afford them, sometimes really about half price are arch supports, and that is something that you can do. I mean, shoes are expensive. Arch supports, really good ones, are maybe 40%, 50% of that, but will give all sorts of value. So there, let's look at shoes. Now, if you look at these two shoes, you notice that there's two sports here. There's hiking, and notice how hiking requires that the foot be in a shoe that gives support while hiking. Or running, where you want more flexibility, because as you run, it's going to be different than when you hike. There's just tons of technology that goes into the design of shoes. Each activity has very specific qualities that are necessary for the correct footwear. Running shoes, for example, are made for straight ahead forward motion, where basketball, tennis shoes are made more for side to side. Hiking shoes are designed with very stiff bottoms, and actually sometimes put little plates in there, enabling the shoes to grab onto rocks. You don't want to run on those. You're going to get horrible knee pain. You're going to get hip pain and back pain if you try and run in hiking shoes. Whereas climbing shoes are made to give point the shoes and give strength to the toes, which can cause blisters and pain in the toes, but they'll allow you to climb. You don't want to climb in hiking shoes. You can if it's a moderate climb for a few minutes, but you've got to be real careful. So this means that you have to spend money on shoes, and to spend good money on shoes for your activities are going to be in the hundreds of dollars, but they'll protect your knees, your ankles, your feet, and your back, and provide the support that you need. If someone does not use the right shoe for the outdoor support, then you will get those pains. When shoes are worn out, they'll tilt your feet, force you to strike the ground in an awkward way, and the slightest angle can hurt your feet and cause back, hip, knee pain, and arch pain. So that becomes important. You don't want your shoe to be too tight or press too hard on your feet. To check proper foot around your heel, place your index finger between your shoe and the foot. In this photograph, you can see the finger being inserted in the back of the toe, between the heel and the shoe. It should go right down. It should be snug, but you should be able to put your finger in there. You should be able to slide it in and out with it should be tight, but it shouldn't be loose. Stand up with your shoe and make sure you have ½ inch between your longest toe and the front of your shoe. Your toes need wiggle room. Otherwise, your toe is going to impact the front of the shoe, and you're going to impact your toes. You could break your toes, get calluses, and you can have an impact on your nails, and they can lift off. So you want ½ inch from your toe. You want to be able to slide your finger in the back. And this is another thing, when you examine someone's foot before they hike, it's very critical to clip your toenails before a hike. If they're too long, your boots or shoes will push in and the nails don't lift off. They'll be traumatized, blood will form under them. This is a photograph of one of our hikers whose the toenail was way too long, and coming down the mountain, he got this impact toenail problem. And then this is very painful. And finally, the toenail lifted off, and then he had to regrow a toenail. So you want to trim your toenails and look at your at the people going with you, family, friends, kids, whoever you're hiking with. Make sure that the toenails are trimmed to avoid this problem. The other thing you want to do is wear the right sock. There is no definitive data that says wearing dual layer socks is better than wearing just one. It really comes down to personal preference. I use dual layer socks. I have really good luck with them. I got the socks come as a teen. There's a thin inner layer that wicks water away, then the outer wool layer. And I have really good luck with those. I never get blisters. But also watch my shoes carefully and make sure that I've got good arch support. But I like dual socks, but that's just me, and I would recommend them, but I can't say that they're better. It's up to the individual. If you choose to wear two socks, the first sock should be thin, skin tight, moisture wicking synthetic sock, get water away from your feet. The purpose of the second outer sock is to reduce friction by serving as a cushion between your foot and the boot. And that really becomes important. Hiking socks are rarely made from a single fabric. They usually weave a lot of stuff into there that gives comfort, warmth, durability, and really fast drying. It's important that your socks dry every day. I go backpacking with people that put new socks on every single day. They don't wear the same sock. If they go 5 days, they take 5 pairs of socks. Wool is the most popular hiking sock and is recommended above all others. They use blends now with synthetic materials that wick water away, and they're faster drying, and they do well. The merino wool is really, really good. So wool socks are really the standard right now. So lace your shoes correctly, and every foot and every boot and shoe is different. You can nullify the benefits of a good pair of boots by not lacing them correctly. Correct fitting shoes or boots by changing the lacing can be done by watching videos online, but depending upon the activity you're doing, you can lace them differently. And you want to make sure that you are lacing them correctly. It's not as simple as you think. I mean, you can tie your shoes, but lacing them correctly will be of great value to you. Let's just talk about blisters now. A blister is a pocket of fluid between the upper layer of skin, but still under the epidermis. The stratum corneum, which is the dead layer calluses are composed of, and the stratum spinosum, the living layer that gives rise to the corneum. And that's where blisters will form, or in between those. They usually develop when on the feet when hiking and climbing. Blisters can be filled with serum, plasma, blood, and pus, or any of the above. They are formed by friction. And remember from your physics that friction is caused by primarily the normal force. The normal force is caused by pushing the shoe on the foot. The normal force is that force of touch. So at 90 degrees to what it's touching. So if you're standing, it's pushing straight up on your foot. On the sides of your shoe, it's pushing out. So that normal force is important. And the other thing is the coefficient of friction. So if you remember, friction equals mu, which is the coefficient of friction, times the normal force. So you, in order to get rid of friction, you want to decrease mu, or that's the coefficient of friction. That's how sticky or how rough something is, and the normal force, which is the push of on the foot is on the shoe. So you can see down here where the cleft forms down between the corneum and the spinosum, as the normal force and the coefficient of friction cause the friction. So repeating shearing forces cause a mechanical separation within the stratum spinosum. Initially, you get this empty space, but hydrostatic pressure fills it with fluid, causing the blister to form. The maximum possible friction is caused again by the coefficient of friction by the normal force, mu times n. And so anything that you can do to lower mu and n will decrease the possibility of friction. So there it is, mu n, and there's the cleft. You can see the shearing forces that then the friction causes. So you can see the normal force. Coefficient of friction is just a number, usually between 0 and 1, which tells you how rough something is or how something grabs onto something. So in order to reduce blisters, you need to decrease the normal force and decrease the coefficient of friction. So there are many successful preventive strategies that are aimed at reducing A, the coefficient of friction, and B, the normal force. Having proper socks and having shoes that fit well are ways to reduce both of those. So friction blisters usually form a hot spot, sore spot first. If they start to form this, then you decrease the coefficient of friction by placing Blistoban on there, or something like Blistoban. That was the first one out. A lot of studies, two big ones came out about 10 years ago that showed that these dual layer films are much better than just say moleskin at preventing blisters, because moleskin is very thick and will actually increase the normal force. And so Blistoban or something like that is very thin and will get away from that. These pads address the two cause of friction, the coefficient of friction and the normal force. So they provide, if you look at that, you can see the center area there, which there's a double layer. So you put that right over the callus, or right over the hot spot, or right over the blister, and then the skin won't grab onto that, and it'll decrease the pressures on there. And these work quite remarkably well. So which brand you buy is sort of up to you. There you can see the two layers, so it reduces the shearing and the frictional forces. Pads, these thick pads, like moleskin, actually increase the normal force, can actually make friction worse. If you do have a blister, moleskin is really good, because then you can put it around the blister and without having necessarily to open the blister, and you can cut a hole in it. This reduces the pressure that is placed on the blister. This should help reduce the pain also. And it's recommended not to open or drain blisters that are small. You can cut these holes around them in a moleskin, and they'll do quite well. So remember, to decrease the normal force, your finger should slide between your heel and the shoe of your foot. And by decreasing the normal force, you decrease the possibility of having friction. So that's why it's important to have a proper fitting shoe, not necessarily a tight fitting shoe, but a proper fitting shoe. So calluses are not preventive. A lot of people think that calluses are good for the feet, but they're not. It's a common misconception. It's not a robust corneum that causes this. So what you want to do is get rid of calluses and shave them off and get rid of them before your hikes. It's a healthy reactive striatum spinosum that protects you from blisters. Thick calluses actually are increased with increased blisters because they increase the normal force. So dirty skin has a higher coefficient of friction, so you want to keep your feet clean. If you look at this person's foot, it's filthy, and that increases the coefficient of friction. So that's really important, and that's why it's essential that you have clean socks. And a good plan is, if you're doing on a multi-day hike, is that you have multiple socks, and that you can clean them off and dry them out. Merino wool dual layers are really good, but keep the socks and the shoes clean so you decrease the coefficient of friction. Wet skin has a lower coefficient of friction, but as water is absorbed by the epidermis, the coefficient of friction begins to increase. So while water at first may decrease, it actually, the skin becomes, when water gets on it, becomes very, very catchy to the shoe and the sock. So you want to keep your shoes very, very dry. That's why controlling moisture is really important in blister prevention. Changing socks is basically aimed at controlling moisture. So you want your socks to be dry, merino wool, and keep it away from your skin. So clean, dry feet are important. Drying powder and antiperspirants are effective strategies, of course, for athletes and hikers with hyperhidrosis. But drying powder in particular can backfire because it becomes saturated from moisture, and if it's not removed, replaced with fresh powder, then it just becomes dirt, and it increases the coefficient of friction. In fact, it's expensive dirt. So you can try those, but it's just better to keep your socks and shoes and feet dry than trying to put things on them. So these sock liners are really successful at reducing blisters by creating a glide layer between the two sock layers. They reduce the coefficient of friction, therefore they decrease friction. You can do those. Make sure that it's a wicking layer. It can be synthetic. Merino wool is also good in that layer. This photo is an ultramarathon runner applying Hydropel to his feet. The strategy works by directly reducing the coefficient of friction as a lubricant, and then, of course, theoretically, indirectly by waterproofing the skin. and preventing the source of the environmental moisture. Now be careful because that can backfire. You have to be cautious with it because lubricants over time are absorbed by the skin and end up raising the coefficient of friction rather than reducing it. So it's better really just to keep your feet dry and change socks as much as possible. Shearing forces on the feet can be reduced by minimizing the normal force. In practice, this means carrying no more than you need to. So ultralight packers and techniques have been pioneered by elite athletes, such as Andrew Skirka here, who is pictured, by carrying less. So by carrying the little amount you can, your feet have decreased normal force, thereby decreasing the possibility of blisters. Training in the footwear you're going to use allows you your stratum spinosum to adapt to local stress, become stronger. So breaking in your boots has as much to do with as breaking in your feet. Train wearing the footwear and the sock system you will use to climb, hike, or backpack or trek, and try that out first and make sure that they work. So if you decide to get a new pair of shoes, try them out first and see if they're going to last you. It's a bad idea to use socks and to use new shoes for the first time on a long trek or hike. You should break your feet in as well as breaking your shoes and getting used to them. Leukotape is a sports tape manufactured for athletic taping, but it has been long used by the endurance sporting community for the prevention and treatment of friction blisters. Once applied to the skin, it sticks tenaciously on most skin, even when wet. If it is applied directly over hot spots or small blisters, it's very useful and can last for days. So this is something that you can use. Also, make sure it's thin. That's important that you do that. Another taping product worth mentioning is Hypafix. It's sort of this retention system. It's been used around the world for a long time. It has the advantage of having backing, so it can be cut into sheets and is easily incorporated into ultralight kits without bringing an entire roll of tape. So you can cut pieces of it off, cut it, round it, and you stick it over the injury, and it provides decreased coefficient of friction, protects the wounds. Picture in this toe is a distance runner. It's deep and associated with a callus. If you look around there, you can see the callus having formed. You should be nervous about draining it unless it's very painful. You should consider leaving this one alone, perhaps just covering it with some Leukotape. Leukotape would stick well even here, but if you tape it, you consider taping it to the neighboring toe so the outside surface of the tape doesn't abrade it. This one was left in place. This one was on a 78-mile in the Western States 100-mile race. See that the area is clean. Antibiotic ointment needs to be applied. Second skin available, and the area covered with Leukotape. In a multi-day event like this trip, wound would be concerning as a source of infection. So this was a foot that was a shoe that was ill-fitting. This should never happen. This should have been caught much, much sooner. This was a climber in the Beartooth Mountains in Montana, used a new boot inserts on the trip without breaking them in, and a pinch tape directly over these areas. This will provide relief as was done in this case, but ideally you'd use antibacterial ointment, second skin, and then tape. Patient climbed trek another 6 days and successfully completed the trip. So you'd have to cut the dead skin off and treat it appropriately, change it often, but that should never be allowed to happen. If you feel this starting, you should stop immediately. That can end a trip. That will take days and weeks to heal appropriately and take a lot of dressing. So that's one reason you want to break in your shoes, break in your feet, and take a lot of material with you when you hike. This is deep and associated with a callus. So the normal force was bigger on this, and that would cause it. You should probably not need to drain, just tape this. This is a blood blister. And the only difference between in this cleft is associated with a capillary bed, so blood drained into it. The difference is cosmetic, and the treatment is no different than just a regular blister. But this also should have been prevented, and the pain associated with it should be caught sooner, and it should have been treated sooner to prevent that from forming. Well, anyway, that's sort of it on foot care, and there's a lot with it, but that's a really important part of medicine is foot care and trekking and backpacking. Spend a little extra money and time, and remember the things mentioned here so you can prevent these problems long before the problems end. Anyway, thank you for listening.